The water was so cold it stole the breath from my lungs. I didn't scream. I didn't have the air. My arms thrashed, not with any real hope, just instinct, just the fire inside me that refused to go out no matter how hard they tried to smother it. One hand clutched tight to the bundle against my chest, the only thing that still mattered in this world. She whimpered, even as the river pulled us under. I held her up, above my head, above the current, as long as I could. Somehow we both made it. I don't remember climbing out. I remember the stones, sharp and wet and unkind beneath my knees. I remember coughing so hard my ribs ached. Mud in my mouth, blood in my shoe, my dress torn open like a butchered sheet, hair hanging in butchered clumps around my face. And I remember thinking, she's going to think we're dead. She's going to tell the neighbors we drowned, and no one's going to look twice. Elsie stirred in my arms. Her tiny fingers curled in my bodice, and her lips found my collarbone like she always did when she needed comfort. I didn't cry. There weren't tears left in me. Not that night. We walked. Well, I limped. One foot was sliced from a rock. I couldn't feel the toes. My right knee throbbed, maybe dislocated, maybe just angry. But I didn't stop. I carried my daughter and walked barefoot down the road that led away from the Mayfield farm, away from Iola's tight-lipped cruelty, away from the porch where Judson had once kissed my fingers like they were porcelain. He was dead now. And Iola? I hoped she was sitting in that big, dark parlor sipping coffee and congratulating herself. Shame on your womb, she'd said the day Elsie was born. You brought forth a girl, not a legacy. She didn't yell it. Iola never raised her voice. She didn't slap or curse or rage. Her venom came in soft whispers and cutting stares, coded in scripture, wrapped in duty. The day she cut my hair was the day I stopped praying. She marched me into the barn, took the shears from the sheep bin, and chopped until my scalp stung and tears soaked the straw. Said a mother who bore girls should look like one. Said it was for humility. Now, the wind caught at my hacked hair and tugged it across my eyes like a funeral veil. The road shimmered under a low-hanging moon, empty but for my footprints and the soft hush of frogs singing near the swollen creek. I hadn't been walking more than a mile when I heard it. Hoofbeats. Slow, deliberate. The kind of sound that made a person think twice about running, but too tired to do anything else. I didn't have the strength to hide. I stood my ground, body shaking from cold and pain and the weight of my baby girl. The horse was a dun mare, light-colored and patient-eyed. The man who sat atop her wore a faded canvas coat, wide-brimmed hat pulled low, and a rifle across his back. His boots looked expensive, but his face did not. One side of it bore the faded red sheen of burned scars, like wax that had melted and cooled wrong. He slowed to a stop, looking down at me. No smile, no tip of the hat, just eyes taking stock of what stood before him. You all right, ma'am? His voice was low, not smooth, but not threatening either. I didn't answer, just gripped Elsie tighter. You alone out here? He asked, scanning the trees, the road behind me. His hand didn't reach for his gun, and for that I was grateful. After a moment, he dismounted. Moved slow, easy. His horse didn't flinch, and neither did I. Name's Bo Ridley, he said. Don't mean no harm. Still, I said nothing. He crouched beside me, not close enough to crowd me, but near enough I could smell trail dust and saddle soap. That baby needs warmth, he said quietly. I've got a camp. Fire. Coffee. You can ride, I'll walk. The voice in my head screamed to keep moving. Keep going. Don't trust anyone. But the voice in my bones, the voice that belonged to every mother who ever carried a child through hell, said sit down before you fall down. She's hungry, I murmured. It surprised me to hear my own voice. He nodded once. Then let's get her fed. I didn't trust him, but I followed. He tied his bedroll behind the saddle and hoisted me up like I weighed nothing. Not a hand out of place. Just business. Elsie cried the whole ride, a soft, wet sound that made me ache. My arms were shaking so bad, I thought I'd drop her. But he rode slow and steady through a copse of cottonwoods until we reached a small, flat clearing near the edge of a rise. Bo dismounted, built a fire, and brewed coffee without saying a word. He gave me a blanket and handed me a clean tin cup. When I hesitated, he took a long sip from his own mug first. I fed Elsie from what little I had left. She quieted, face pressed to my chest, her small body warmer than my own. "You got a name?" he asked gently. I hesitated. Then, "Clara." "Clara," he repeated like it mattered. "You from around Bent Tree?" "No," I said. "East of the river." He didn't ask more, just nodded like he understood. We sat there, fire snapping low, him sipping coffee, me clutching my baby like the only thing keeping me whole. The sky stretched wide and indifferent above us, stars smeared across it like silver chalk. "I don't usually pick up strays," he said eventually. I looked at him, weary. "Is that what I am?" He glanced at me sideways. Not to me. I didn't know then what kind of man Bo Ridley was. Didn't know what scars he carried beneath his coat or what ghosts rode beside him. But in that moment, I knew he wasn't Iola. He didn't want to break me or shame me or make me small. And that was enough. I didn't ask where we'd go come morning. I didn't ask what he wanted in return. I just sat by the fire, warming the soles of my feet, and watched the shadows move like smoke between the trees, knowing for the first time in too long that I hadn't died in that flood. And neither had hope. The wind smelled like old hay and rust when I first stepped onto the Mayfield farm. I remember the way the boards creaked beneath my feet, the way Judson stood beside me with one hand on my elbow and the other twisted up in a leather glove he never removed. Ismail watched from the porch, thin lips pressed together like she'd been weaned on vinegar. That was the first time I saw Iola Mayfield. She didn't offer a smile or a greeting, just looked at me and said, "You brought a trunk?" I had. One trunk, mostly patched linens, and a few books my mama left me, wrapped tight in quill scraps. I said yes. She said, "Well, best not get used to space." I thought I'd misunderstood her. I thought maybe grief had hollowed her out. Judson's pa had passed not long before our wedding, and Judson had said she was still adjusting. I gave her grace, thinking time would soften her. I believed that then, the way young women do when they want something to work. Judson was good to me, in his way. Quiet, rough-handed, full of aches from a war he didn't speak of and lungs that rattled when the nights got cold. He'd take his coffee black and his peace where he could find it. Sometimes that was with me. Sometimes it was watching the sky roll over the wheat fields with his boots off and his bad hand in his lap. We made do, and when I learned I was with child, I thought maybe things were turning. Iola didn't say a word the day I told them. Just pursed her lips, nodded once, and went on cutting carrots. But the next day, she gave me a silver crucifix on a chain. Said it was hers once, back when she was a girl with dreams. I wore it every day after that, thinking maybe that was her way of saying she saw me. But when the baby came, and the midwife whispered "girl" with a soft, sweet smile, the room turned colder than the river ever had. Iola stared at me like I'd robbed her. "A girl?" she said, voice sharp with disappointment. "That's what you've done." "She's healthy," the midwife said. "Beautiful little thing." "She's useless," Iola snapped. "You think that'll hold this land?" Judson looked like he wanted to protest, but he didn't. He just sat on the edge of the bed, face pale and drawn, coughing into a cloth he tried to hide from me. He died 12 days later. Pneumonia, they said, caught out in a storm, trying to fix the barn roof. I asked why he was up there alone. Iola said, because his wife was in bed, resting, like I was blame wrapped in lace. I buried him on the hill, under the cottonwood that leaned a little to the left. Iola stood beside me in black, holding Elsie like she was something to be tolerated, not cherished. When the service ended, she handed her back to me and said, "The farm doesn't stop for death, Clara." I nodded. What else could I do? Winter came hard. I chopped wood with blistered hands and washed linens until my knuckles bled. Iola never raised a hand to me, but she didn't have to. Her rules came wrapped in that same cold tone, commands delivered like scripture. No second helpings. No reading after supper. No baby in the parlor when she had guests. Once, I asked if I could write to my sister in Missouri. She said, "Mail costs money, and we don't waste money on pointless things." Elsie started crawling, gumming at scraps of bread and babbling at the cat. Iola frowned every time she laughed too loud. "She'll grow wild," she warned. Just like her mother. I'd learned not to answer back. Silence was safer. But inside me, something was coiling tight, something hot and wordless. Then came the day with the shears. I was in the barn, feeding the hens, when Iola appeared with her old sewing basket and a quiet look I'd come to fear. She told me to sit. I hesitated. She pointed. I sat. She didn't explain. She just pulled out the shears and started cutting. Long strands of my hair fell like autumn leaves, soft and slow. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I felt each snip like a crack in a dam, but I stayed still, lips pressed shut. When she finished, she stepped back and said, "A woman who brings shame into a house ought to wear the look of penitence." That night, I curled beside Elsie in the loft and swore to myself I'd leave. But there were no wagons. No stagecoach ran near. I had no money, no kin nearby, and a baby to keep fed. I waited. I told myself to bide time. Then came the storm. The river swelled, choked with mud and branches. Rain fell for 2 days straight. On the third morning, Iola woke me before dawn and said the coop needed checking. I bundled Elsie in a shawl and went outside. She followed me. At the edge of the creek, she said something strange. "Sins don't wash out easy, Clara. Sometimes the river needs to be reminded." I turned, heart pounding. She stepped forward, sudden and sure. I backed away, but the bank was slick and my foot slipped. The world tilted. Elsie cried out. Iola's hands were on my shoulders. Then water. Cold. Black. Endless. She thought I drowned. I wasn't meant to climb back out, but I did. And now, by this fire in the middle of nowhere, with a stranger who hadn't asked me for anything except my name, I began to understand something fierce and clear. Iola hadn't broken me. She'd only shown me what I needed to run from. And I wasn't going back. The next morning, Bo handed me a piece of jerky and a strip of dried apple, then went about breaking camp like he'd done it 100 times. No small talk. No questions. Just the scrape of boots on earth, the clink of a tin cup against his saddlebag, and the slow breath of the mare cropping grass nearby. I watched him from where I sat with Elsie in my lap, her cheeks pink from sleep, hair sticking up in every direction. She cooed when he passed, and he gave her a look, not quite a smile, but softer than the one he gave the rest of the world. "Where are you headed?" I asked. Bo glanced up, then shrugged. "Don't much matter. North, maybe. Heard there's work on the rail lines up near Painted Bluff." Painted Bluff. That name meant nothing to me, but the direction did. It wasn't east. It wasn't toward the Mayfield place. "I don't have people," I said, unprompted. "No kin close by. No money." He nodded once, slow and measured. Figured as much. I thought maybe he'd offer to drop me in town, point me toward a church or a kind widow with too many rooms. Instead, he said, "You ever cook trail food?" "Depends. Does beans and bitter coffee count?" He almost smiled. "Good enough." I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't want to press the moment too hard, in case it cracked open and spilled out something less kind than what I'd just heard. He offered me the back of the mare. "Name's Clementine," he said. "She don't mind company." Elsie rode in a sling tied close to my chest, wrapped in the same quilt that had once lined my wedding trunk. The morning sun turned the dust gold, and the wind carried the smell of cedar and wild onion. For a moment, I let myself pretend we weren't running, that this was a beginning, not an escape. Bo didn't talk much, but what he did say had weight. He'd fought in the war, like Judson. Different side, maybe, or maybe the same. Men like them didn't talk about which flag they bled under. They just bore it in their bones. I asked him once, after we'd made camp near a dry creek, what happened to his face. "The burn scar." "Fire," he said simply. "Barn caught. I went in for the horses." "Did you get him out?" He looked at me then, long and steady. All but one. That was the end of that conversation. I learned to read him in the silence. The way he polished his rifle when he was thinking too hard. The way he kept watch while I fed Elsie, always with his back to us, eyes on the trees. Not out of disrespect, out of instinct, like he'd been ambushed one too many times to let his guard down now. One evening, after 5 days on the trail, we came upon a run-down station house tucked into the folds of a shallow valley. Bo slowed his horse and studied it like a gambler eyeing a deck. Smoke curled from the chimney. Laundry flapped on a sagging line. Someone lived there. He turned to me. "They might have biscuits." It was his way of asking if I wanted to risk it. I nodded. A woman answered the knock. Broad-shouldered, sun-dark, with eyes that didn't blink much. She looked at Bo first, then at me, then at Elsie. "Lord above," she muttered. "You picked a bad time to be wandering." Bo offered his name. Told her mine too, without waiting for permission. She studied me for a moment longer, then opened the door wider. Inside smelled like stew and pipe smoke. A thin boy with a cowlick ran past us, chasing a dog with one floppy ear. The woman shouted after him, "Charlie, mind the pot." We sat at the table, ate with wooden spoons, and didn't ask for seconds. Bo talked with the woman. Name was Ruth Corley, widow of 2 years, running the station alone with her boy and 2 aging mules. She offered us a place to sleep in the hayloft. I thought Bo would refuse, but he looked at Elsie, then nodded. One night, I lay down with my daughter wrapped in the quilt and haste sticking to my dress. Bo stayed near the ladder, rifle in reach, eyes half shut but never asleep. "You don't trust people much," I whispered in the dark. "People got teeth," he murmured back. "Some bite harder than animals." I thought of Iola, her smile, her shears. "Yeah," I said, "they do." In the morning, Ruth handed me a parcel wrapped in brown paper. "Corn cakes and dried pears," she said. "Girls gotta eat." I thanked her. She looked me square in the face and said, "You're not the first to come through here with ghosts. Just keep moving. Ghosts hate the wind." We rode on. That night, as the moon rose over the pines and the fire crackled low, Bo took a small tin from his saddlebag. Inside was a scrap of paper, folded and refolded until the edges were soft as cloth. He handed it to me. A sketch. A girl's face. Sharp chin, eyes like a hawk's. "My sister," he said. "Haven't seen her in 6 years. Last letter said she was near Dry Creek. Is that where we're headed now?" He didn't answer, just stared into the fire. That was when I realized he wasn't just helping me run. He was running too. The land changed as we rode west, flattened out some. The trees thinning into scrub and rock. The wind taking on that dry, restless whistle that speaks of long distances and harsher truths. Bo said little, same as always, but I'd come to recognize the tightness in his jaw, the way his hand stayed near the reins even when there wasn't trouble in sight. He had a direction now, and though he didn't say it outright, I could feel it in the way Clementine pressed forward, like she knew too. Dry Creek. I didn't ask about his sister again. I figured if she wanted to be found, there'd be signs. And if she didn't, well, a man could chase ghosts till his bones wore out and still never catch them. Elsie was teething. Nights were harder now. Less sleep, more whimpering and soft sobs into my chest as I rocked her against the backdrop of firelight and creaking saddle leather. Bo never complained. In fact, he started making her little things from whittled pine. First a ring to chew on, then a tiny bird that fit in her palm. She smiled at him now, reached for him with sticky fingers, and sometimes I caught him watching her like he wanted to remember every sound she made. One morning, as we passed a wind-worn ridge, I spotted riders in the distance, 2 of them, moving slow but steady, like they knew the land and didn't mind being seen. Bo tensed the moment he saw them. "Trouble?" I asked. "Don't know yet," but his eyes stayed on them until they passed out of sight behind the next hill. Later, when we stopped to water the horses at a spring, Bo turned to me and said, "You sure nobody's following you?" I froze, hand halfway to the canteen. "You think they were?" He didn't answer directly. "Woman like your mother-in-law. She let a thing go easy?" I shook my head. "No, she's not the kind to forgive. Or forget." Bo spat into the dirt. "Didn't think so." We rode faster after that. Made camp only when darkness insisted. He started teaching me how to hold a rifle, how to listen to the land, how to read hoof prints and watch for broken branches in the underbrush. I did what he said, not because I thought she'd come, but because I knew the kind of hate that could live inside a woman like Iola. Cold, patient, righteous. By the time we crossed into the Dry Creek Township, my bones ached from the saddle, and Elsie had worn a hole in the shoulder of my dress from her chewing. The town was smaller than I expected, more dust than structure, with only one main road, and buildings leaning into the wind like they'd seen too many seasons come and go. Bo led us straight to the saloon. I stayed outside, rocking Elsie on the porch while Bo stepped into the smoke and noise, that scarred face of his disappearing through swinging doors. He was gone long enough, I started to wonder if he'd changed his mind, run off, or maybe found what he came looking for and didn't want to drag us along anymore. But when the doors banged open again, he wasn't alone. A woman followed him out, lean, sharp-eyed, with a jaw like his and a way of walking that dared anyone to look twice. She paused when she saw me, arms folded, one brow lifting in suspicion. "This her?" she asked. Bo nodded. "Clara." "And the girl's Elsie." The woman came closer, boots kicking up dust, her gaze moving over me, slow and steady. "She your woman?" she asked him, never taking her eyes off me. Bo shook his head. "No, should be," she muttered. Then she stuck out her hand. "Name's Mercy." I took it. Her grip was firm. No frills. The kind of woman who'd get a rabbit and plow a field in the same day. She offered us space in the back of a livery barn she ran with her husband, a quiet black man named Red who nodded more than he spoke and moved with the smooth grace of someone who didn't like drawing attention. They gave us blankets, a kettle, even a bit of flour and lard. It was the safest I'd felt in weeks. That night, while Bo and Mercy smoked on the porch, I sat with Elsie by a low fire, staring into the glow and wondering if this could be the end of the road. If we could stay here, maybe. Help with the horses. Cook for Mercy's crew. Earn our keep in a way Iola could never erase. But just as the thought formed, I heard a sound that turned my blood to ice. The slow, deliberate creak of wagon wheels. It was late. No travelers came through at this hour. I looked toward the road, heart pounding. Bo heard it too. He stood before I could call out, eyes narrowed. Mercy stepped off the porch and said one word. "Who?" The wagon didn't stop at the saloon, didn't veer toward the livery. It stopped directly in front of the barn, and from the shadows stepped a figure I knew like breath. Iola Mayfield. She wore black, same as she had at the funeral. Her hair pulled tight, her hands in gloves. She looked straight at me, past Mercy, past Bo. Her voice was calm, even. "I've come for what's mine."